Hey guys, Aaron here with Functional Aesthetics in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So, in some previous videos, I had done a series on healthy shoulders, specifically because I myself had had an AC joint sprain and was trying to heal my shoulders. So, in those videos, I dealt primarily with exercises that were in the shoulder girdle region. So, your collarbone, shoulder blades, the upper arm, and working with the rotator cuff, your retractors of your shoulders, your rhomboids in the back, as well as some stretching exercises you could do. So, in addition to exercises specifically acting on the shoulder, you can improve the health of your shoulders by improving other areas that also interact with the shoulder. So the whole body is connected together in one kinetic chain from your feet all the way up to your head. So today I'd like to talk about anterior pelvic tilt. And what is anterior pelvic tilt? Well, anterior pelvic tilt is when your pelvis, if you look at my waistband here, and I have a slight amount of anterior pelvic tilt here. You don't want any more than about 10 degrees, and I vary sometimes, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But anyway, anterior pelvic tilt is where, if you look at the waistband, if it drops down like this, you know your pelvis, if you think of it as like a bucket, it's tipped forward, right? So the reasons why you can have anterior pelvic tilt is due to what we call a force couple. So if you picture your hips as being kind of like the axle on a car, right? And everything, the whole wheel rotates around that, right? Or actually a better example is a pulley. So if you have a pulley and the axis of rotation around that pulley is where your hip joint is, right? Now, the pelvis rotates around that, around the hip joint where the head of the femur goes into the acetabulum, that hollow depression in the side of your pelvis. So you have a couple different pulleys pulling on that access point there. So in the front, you have your hip flexors, and the hip flexors pull the pelvis down. In the back, you have the spinal erector muscles all the way up your back. So if you're doing a lot of deadlifts, working those spinal erectors. Now, spinal erectors, unlike the hip flexors, pull your pelvis up in the back. But if you are sitting for long periods of time, your hip flexors are short, so when you go to stand up, the pelvis is going to tip forward like this, right? And then if your back extensors are tight as well, it's going to further pull that pelvis up. So to counteract that, your body has the glute muscles in the back, so your big butt muscles in the back here, which their function is extension of the hips, external rotation, so to turn the hip slightly out, and then below that you have the hamstrings, which is also extension of the hip as well as bending the knee. So they assist the glutes in extending the hips. So those are going to help pull the pelvis down. And then in the front, the ones that help pull the pelvis up as opposed to down to counteract the hip flexors that are pulling down is going to be your rectus abdominis. So the rectus abdominis, we do a lot of crunches and things like that. However, its function is to actually pull the pelvis up in the front and give you that neutral pelvis alignment. So why is it bad to have an anterior pelvic tilt? Well, let's start from the feet and move right up to the head. Okay, so if you look at your hips here, and I was talking about the hips coming forward like this. So when the hips tip forward like this, it changes the angle for the head of the femur in that acetabulum, and it causes the knees to come in. So I should have been wearing shorts for this, but if you look at the legs here, and if I tip forward, my knees come in. So when my hips come in, or when my upper legs rotate inward, causing the knees to come in, that also causes the lower leg down here to rotate in as well, causing your foot, the arch of your foot, to flatten out and overpronate. So when the feet overpronate, it can cause, as you might already know, that arch in your foot is supposed to act as a shock absorber. You know, when you land, it depresses, springs back up. But if you're overpronating, you're going to stress some muscles up above that. So, as I stated before, the glute muscles help to externally rotate in addition to extending the hips. So if you're overpronating, those glutes are getting overstretched. The IT band, which connects to the glutes, runs across down over the knee, is getting overstretched. And you're causing a lot of medial stress or stress to the inner side of your knee every time you're landing on the ground. That's why you can get like some injuries to that MCL over time. Get meniscus tears. So why women tend to get a lot more of those type of injuries, just because they have the wider hips, increases that, what they call it, the Q angle, and causes more force to the inner side of the knee here. Okay, so moving on from the feet, ankles, and knees, we'll go up to the hips here and see how that anterior pelvic tilt, which is directly in the hips, affects everything above the hips. So, if you notice, when my hips come forward like this, it causes my head to tilt forward as well. So now I'd be looking straight at the ground. So, of course, this is an exaggeration, but in order to look up, I need to bring my back up like this and increase that curve in my lower back here, which then in turn can cause my shoulders to kind of slump forward like this, and then to further be able to look up. So now I have to curve the back of my head up like this. So obviously that's an exaggeration of it, but just so to show you how and illustrate how having that anterior pelvic tilt can cause not only for your stomach to look like it's sticking out all the time, it can also cause your shoulders to slump forward and throw off the alignment of your neck. So it throws your shoulders out of alignment, just having your hips out of alignment. And as I talked about in the previous videos, having your shoulders out of proper alignment can cause excess wear and tear on the tendons and the muscles on the tendons of the muscles running through that region, as well as possibly pinching some nerves off when those tendons are in the wrong spot, not aligned properly. Okay, so now that we know that there's a problem there and why we have the problem, how it develops, what are we going to do about the problem? So, as you might have already guessed, well, we want to do some stuff to balance out the imbalances in the musculature. And that's going to involve a combination of releasing the muscles. So, myofascial release techniques. You're going to stretch the muscles, as well as doing some exercises to strengthen weak muscles. So you want to stretch both the tight muscles and the weak muscles, and you want to strengthen the weakened muscles. So we sit here. One exercise you can do for the weak glutes to help kind of get any knots out of them from inactivity is to sit on a foam roller like this, and you cross one leg over the top of the other one, and then roll back and forth. And then if you want to focus more on the external rotators of your hip, like your piriformis, you can rotate out to the side a little bit, like this. You want to do about 30 seconds of that every time you do it. Try to do it every day until it stops. If you feel any discomfort, just kind of camp out on the area where it feels uncomfortable. Do that for about 30 seconds to a minute. And try to do that every day. Okay, so once that's feeling okay, then you want to be doing some exercises to help stretch those muscles out. So you can do exercises like this to stretch the glutes in the back. You can also do stuff to revitalize your hip flexors. So get the tension out of them. If they've been shortened for a long period of time, your hip flexors right here, lay them on the roller. and even cant off to one side just a tad. Can help you get a little bit better stretch there. And put more emphasis on the hip flexor. So for me, I know on my right side, I have a little bit more tightness in the hip flexor. And so doing this, I can feel it more on my right side. Okay, so some of you guys might not have that degree of tension in the hip flexors. You might not need to do the foam rolling. But in any case, whether you're doing the foam rolling first to loosen up the area and make it more responsive to stretching, after you do the foam rolling, then you want to do your stretching exercises. So we're going to stretch the hip flexors out, and since the hip flexor brings your leg up and also slightly externally rotates it, you can push through with your butt. So make sure you're not leaning forward. Try to stay pretty straight up and down, and think about driving your butt straight horizontal with the or parallel to the ground, as opposed to just leaning forward like this. So squeeze your glutes in the back, or your butt muscle, to drive your hip forward through here, and it'll stretch your hip flexor out. Alright guys, that wraps up this video. Due to time constraints, I'm going to cut it short here and make a second video showing you the exercises that you'll need to wrap this section up on fixing your anterior pelvic tilt, which will ultimately help you fix problems with your knees, your ankles, and even some problems with you might have with your shoulders, as well as your lower back. So if you like this video, be sure to share it with your friends. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you all next time for more health and fitness related information. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you next time.